everybody wants to stop us. I mean, the political establishment want to stop us. The political establishment do not want change. And of course, it's great, isn't it? Rishi gives way to Keir. It's just a change in middle management. Nothing radically different is going to happen. Things will just get a little bit worse. No, everything was done to try and stop us. If you look at the story selection from the BBC, things that activists said became major news stories. Did that happen with the Labour Party under Corbyn? Well, we did see some of the anti-Semitism, but frankly, not that much of it. The Channel 4 stitch-up over the so-called racist campaigner, I mean, the biggest fraud I've ever seen. The guy's an actor, a posh actor, who turned up in our office sounding like Alf Garnett. I mean, the whole thing was a stitch-up. I could moan and moan and moan, but there isn't much point. The fact is that we have no support from any national newspaper. The broadcasters, including GB News, were very limited by Ofcom in terms of the coverage they could actually give us. And the BBC acted as a political actor right throughout. My first interview on the BBC, I did a speech from Dover about the boats and why Labour's plan wouldn't work. And the new BBC News channel took it live. Midway through, they cut off, and the presenter said, well, there's Nigel Farage again using his customary inflammatory language. Just extraordinary. Now, I actually got an on-air apology, but that's not the point. It was clear from the start that the BBC had a political objective. This ran right through the Russia stuff, where the fact that I predicted 10 years ago what would happen and I was right about Ukraine suddenly becomes I'm a Putin supporter. I mean, some of this stuff's always going to happen. It's politics. People get very tribal. But the extent of the bashing was extraordinary. Do you know what? We're through it. I'm already planning the county council elections next year. I've been in an office here earlier on today, sorting that out as a campaign room. We are very conscious now of the potential we have with Labour voters. I mean, Tony Blair even writes in the Sunday Times that reform could now be a threat to a Labour vote. The whole establishment knows that we're here. It also knows we're not going away. And can the Conservative Party claw those votes back from us? They're so split and divided. I mean, the civil war's broken out already within the Conservative Party. So look, I genuinely think we're in a very, very strong position. Our membership is booming. We've got more members now than I ever had as leader of UKIP, for example, even when that was a major party going back a decade. So look, we're in good shape.
When it comes to this Tory challenge that you're going to put on for not just the local elections, but looking forward to 5 years, as of course you have to be already looking forward 5 years, is there a single candidate fighting in this civil war now who makes you nervous? Which one do you look at and think they can speak to reform voters like the others can't?
Well, the media think it's Boris Johnson. But, I mean, you're having a laugh, aren't you? I mean, he's the reason they're in this much trouble. He's the one who betrayed the reason that so many red wallers voted Conservative for the first time in their lives in 2019. He is Boris Johnson of mass immigration. He is Boris Johnson of insane application of net zero rules. He is Boris Johnson of, do as I say, not as I do. So the idea that Boris leads them back to victory, I frankly think that's completely for the birds. Look, I don't think it matters who wins. Whether it's a Priti Patel or a Suella Braverman, whether it's a Jeremy Hunt, who, by the way, did very well to hold on to his constituency. It just shows you hard work on the ground, and he did work hard, does pay off. It could be a Jeremy Hunt, it could be a Tugendhat. I don't think it matters who wins. They will be split and divided. They don't agree on anything. The one nation, internationalist, globalist view against the Eurosceptic view. I mean, the earthquake of Brexit, still, the shockwaves are still coming through the political system. And one of the reasons, so that deals with that. And one of the reasons Blair is really worried about the Labour vote on us is it's all well and good David Lammy saying we want to have a better relationship with the European Union. But if that means tying us back to EU rules, then the Labour Party are going to be vulnerable with many of their voters who did vote Brexit. So I think we're in a very good place. And am I ringing up former MPs or current MPs saying joining us? I've got better things to do.
Well, joining me now to react to all of that is Danny Kruger, Conservative MP for East Wiltshire, and former Conservative MP Jacob Rees-Mogg, of course, has his first show back tonight. Danny, let's start with you. We spoke to Robert Jenrick earlier on today, also on GB News, and he said there could be no role in the Conservative Party for Nigel Farage. What do the Tories do about their Nigel Farage problem?
Well, listen, our problem is actually with the Conservative Party. We lost voters to Nigel's party, and our great mission must be to understand why it was that happened. Jacob and I have probably a shared analysis of that. We've been arguing for the last 2 years that our party should have been much more robust on migration. We've failed on a whole range of issues that the public care a lot about that we promised to fix, the NHS being the obvious one. That's why we lost. They went to reform because Nigel presented a very compelling analysis of the problems of the country. He's essentially right in what he was saying. Our mission as a party must be to win those voters back. I honour Nigel. Congratulations to him for winning his seat. But the issue is not him or his colleagues in Parliament. It's with those voters who have deserted us. And our challenge is to see whether we can win them back.
And how, Jacob Rees-Mogg, do you think that happens? There can be no role in the party for Nigel Farage, says Robert Jenrick. Suella Braverman is saying she'll welcome him into the party with open arms. Once again, we have this schism.
Well, no, there's a leadership election that is about to take place, and you would expect that both Robert and Suella will be putting themselves forward as candidates, and they're setting out their stall. And at the initial stage, they need to appeal to Conservative members of Parliament, many of whom are perhaps One Nationers, who may be a little bit frightened of Nigel. So I can quite understand why somebody who wants to be a candidate at this stage is saying nothing should be done with Nigel. Nigel is a very important political figure. 4 million people voted for Nigel. That's the thing to remember. They wouldn't have voted for reform if it had been led by Richard Tice. However, and I like Richard, he's a capable man, very good businessman, but he doesn't have that oomph, that charisma. Nigel gets through to people like Boris does. And that is something that is very valuable in politics. And the Conservatives need to work out, how can we have an offering that is not only sound politically, not only deals with migration and cutting taxes, but has a presentation that can cut through to voters.
Danny Kruger, the quickest way to absorb that vote is surely just to absorb Nigel Farage into the Conservatives.
Well, he's saying he doesn't want to join the Conservative Party, and he's
it is now.
Well, and he's just stood against us at an election. So I don't think there's any question of him joining us or of us joining him. The fact is, we are two different parties. But some of us in the Conservative Party share the same analysis as he and those voters who've left us, which is that the British government failed the British people in the last Parliament. We did lots of good things. Don't want to dismiss that, but fundamentally we didn't deliver for the people. Our mission is to win those people back. And yes, and I agree with Jacob's view there. There is a challenge around this very impressive, charismatic character in Nigel. But I don't agree with you that we will solve our problems simply by admitting him. We also have to consider those many people who did vote for us. We need to keep them. The Conservative Party is at its best when it combines with that respectable, traditional, centrist Conservative tendency, that centre-right tendency, with the people themselves in those kind of places that we've just lost. That's what the Conservative Party at its best can do. It won't do that if we just swing straight to aping reform. We have to bring those voters back to where we are, and that means ourselves moving in a direction towards them.
Jacob, final words. You've got about 30 seconds. What happens next for the Conservative Party?
What happens next? Well, first of all, we mustn't arrogantly assume that voters are pieces on a chessboard, that we can move according to positions that we make, that we have to win them over by arguments. So it's making the policies and it's restructuring the Conservative Party to make it a good campaigning team. And I'll be talking more about what went wrong after 8 o'clock.
And now, of course, you're Jacob Rees-Mogg unleashed. You're off the hook. You can speak more freely.
I am the Ed Balls of GB News.
Wow, now that...